Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the April meeting of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee. And our thoughts go out to the people of Taiwan, and particularly the county of Hualien, who was affected by the earthquake yesterday. We have a selection of councillors in attendance in person and a number online. The members who are online: Councillor Fully, Sayers, Newman, Hills, Turner, Bartley, and member Renata. Have I covered them all off?
Councillor Leone.
And Councillor Leone. Okay, first item is the apologies. We have an apology for lateness from Councillor Fully on council business. Any other apologies?
And the Mayor.
And the Mayor for lateness. And Sayers for lateness. I'm reliably informed. I'll move it. Councillor Fletch will second it. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Item 2, declaration of interest. Any declarations? No. We have the minutes for confirmation from Thursday 7th of March and Wednesday 27th of March, which was an extraordinary meeting. Councillor Fletcher will move that. I'll second that. All those in favour? Aye. Good. Against? Carried. Including the person who fell off their chair. Petitions? There are none, which brings us to the first substantive items of the day, and that's the public input, which we always look forward to hearing what people have got to say. And we have a couple of interesting presentations today. The first one up is Surface Light Rail in Auckland, and the presenter is going to be Connor Sharp. And Connor will address the committee on behalf of Surface Light Rail regarding their surface light rail plans in Auckland, the route and the built infrastructure that would be necessary to support those plans. And I think a presentation should be there available for members, has been emailed out. So Connor, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation, after which we'll open up to a couple of questions from the members. Welcome, Connor, and the floor is yours.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Connor Sharp, and I'm back to present to you all today on behalf of Surface Light Rail. I wanted to take the opportunity to delve more specifically into our plan for Surface Light Rail in Auckland. Our plan is based on pre-2019 design and planning work of light rail, updated with learnings from the past 5 years. I'm also going to briefly discuss how we as an organisation are building support for this plan, and how our work shows a solid, realistic pathway to deliver Surface Light Rail in Auckland. So stage 1 of our plan connects the city centre to Mount Roskill. It's approximately 9 kilometres long, and based on a range of costs seen overseas, we would expect to pay $50 to $200 million per kilometre. Using a conservative estimate of 150, stage 1 of the project would cost $1.35 billion. Given where we are now, a 9-kilometre route might seem ambitious, but stages for light rail in Sydney were longer. Both the CBD and South East Line and Parramatta Stage 1 were 12 kilometres. Stage 1 would provide a maximum capacity of around 9,000 passengers per hour. For context, that's 4 times the capacity of a busway and won't reach full capacity until the 2050s. Our proposed stations are located at town centres and connection points with the rest of the network. Depending on community feedback, it's possible to add sort of 1 or 2 more stations to address gaps in the placement, but this may be better addressed by buses. As our plan has been based on pre-existing work, we aren't starting from scratch. Previous work can be drawn from and used to kind of expedite any future planning or design work. If we focus on the city centre, Queen Street would be pedestrianised from Custom Street to Merrill Drive. Successes on George Street and Sydney show that this would be fantastic for both residences and businesses, vastly improving the sort of amenities and vibrancy of the space. Queen Street is actually the cheapest and easiest part to build due to its wide roadway and most of its services already being removed. There's also an option to connect this to Wynyard Quarter, and we'll be looking into that in the near future. If we progress further, K Road is likely the most difficult part of stage 1 to build. With the gradient of the street, there would need to be an underpass under K Road, but there has actually been design work done on this in the 2020 City Centre Master Plan. So on Dominion Road, You need to do some work on station design, especially considering the corresponding road space allocation. But light rail would replace one of the busiest bus corridors outside of the Northern Busway. We do want to stress how important it is to design the transport corridor within the curb space of the road, as widening the corridor adds significant cost through property acquisition and is unnecessary. At the end of Dominion Road, we would look to connect with the major development in Wesley. There is also flexibility to build part of the eastern stretch towards Onehunga in Stage 1. Having that option is important, as there are possible depot locations either side of Dominion Road, and having a multitude of choices advantages any needed sort of land acquisition for that. For future stages, an extension to Onehunga running along State Highway 20 would be relatively easy. Extending this to Māngere would require significant work crossing the waterway, and this should be looked at early when Stage 1 begins construction. There are also questions around how light rail connects with the Māngere Town Centre. There was a lot of community support for a direct connection, although there is an option to run along the motorway, and that was pushed by ALR. There are pros and cons for both options, but either way, the decision should be community-led. Finally, if the route were to connect to the airport, it should be on the basis of connecting a major employer with the rest of the city, and that sort of city centre to airport connection is a secondary benefit of that. As an organisation, we're taking a two-pronged approach to building support. The first is sort of engagement with communities and stakeholders. This includes residents group, businesses, business associations, and just general community groups and people. This is to build grassroots support to get everybody on board collectively with a sort of solid plan and vision for the project. The second is in the political sphere. This is from the local board level to central government. And the aim of this is to remove the partisanship towards light rail, give it a refresh, and to build support across all levels of government. We have spoken to MPs across the political divide to build that cross-party support. And we're also running parliamentary petition to kind of show the government that surface light rail has the support of Aucklanders. I also wanted to discuss a very important point that was raised by a major business in Auckland. They explained how given Auckland Light Rail's cancellation, light rail wasn't necessarily on the top of people's minds, but they then used the city rail link as an example of how Auckland can lead the way on getting this done. As I'm sure many of you will know, City Rail Link was driven forward by Auckland Council and a previous mayor of Auckland, Len Brown. Initial work such as station design, planning and designation works was funded by Auckland. And because of that work, and the championing of the project by Auckland, it was eventually funded by a government who had opposed it for many years, often quite publicly. So right now, Auckland can produce the funding for the pre-work for surface light rail. We mentioned the Dominion Road flyover in our submission to the long-term plan, and wanted to outline a few things about that. Land around the flyover is owned by Auckland Council, specifically the road parcels, which are vested in council by default. Between the flyover and Newton Road, there's about 7 hectares of council-owned land, and only about half of this is actually needed for the intersection, which means over 3 hectares of land could be unlocked. Based on previous work, you'd be looking at $95 million of profit after the cost of reconstruction. By redeveloping this flyover, initial work on surface light rail could be funded without taking away from other council priorities. Lastly, with the Eastern Busway, Northwest Rapid Transit and Airport to Botany being advanced, the city centre of Māngere remains the only corridor that's not currently that's sort of missing from the long-agreed Auckland Transport Alignment Project Plan. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I hope to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Connor. That was very interesting. We'll open up for a couple of quick questions now. Councillor Walker and Councillor Ferry.
Sure. Hi. Good presentation. I just wonder whether your group has looked at trackless trams. They can deliver on the same routes, don't have any capital cost, run on the existing roading network, are in place in other cities and could be implemented rapidly.
Yeah, so this was something that we have done a fair bit of research on. It was brought up by some of the business associations I spoke to. The two biggest issues we kind of found with them was, one, the quality of the roads and the sort of foundation is often not the best in Auckland, and it means that to kind of run them at full capacity, especially on, say, Dominion Road, there's kind of a lot of strengthening works that would come out at the same sort of cost and construction as surface light rail would be. And the second is also, because this is, technology's been around for a while, but there's only actually a few suppliers of the technology, and so there is a bit of a market risk there that when a certain model, say, would go out of its life cycle, there may not be a good supplier for different parts, whereas sort of tracked surface light rail, there is a very, very healthy and sort of broad market of that, so you wouldn't have those long-term sort of risks.
Just a comment. If one of the suppliers was one of the largest transport companies on the planet in terms of their build and their operation, maybe the supplier issue is not an issue. Just in respect of the ability of the road to cope, I'd be interested as to whether you've got some information on that, because obviously you've got to clock in a considerable work for putting the rails in place and all the other infrastructure. So if you have looked into that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up with you.
Yeah, then maybe do that offline, Connor, if that's possible. Thanks. Councillor Ferry?
Thank you. Thanks, Connor, and really appreciate the work that your team's doing on this. And I think it's a good example of potentially not throwing the baby out with the bathwater in terms of what we can learn and take on board. I was curious about whether you've had any discussions yet or presented yet to the AT board on this, and also specifically regarding that flyover issue, that might be something to raise with Eki Panuku as well. So have you had any contact with those CCOs at all yet?
Not as of yet. It's sort of on the list of things to do. It's just, because we're a volunteer organisation, there's always capacity and how much we can do. So yeah, it's on the list and will be in the near future, I expect.
Yeah, cool. I think that those conversations could be really useful, and really appreciate the frequent updates you bring to us. Thank you.
Last question, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Look, this is fantastic. Just picking up on your words around your project needing champions, and I'm just wondering how you want to engage with us in an ongoing way, because we'd love to have you here, but it seems like there might be an extra step that we might need to do to engage. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we're always happy to have sort of conversations with anyone to kind of go into this in a lot more detail than maybe the space can allow. If there's also any specific questions anyone has, especially on the more detailed parts of this, like, we're also happy to answer. I think the main point we'd want to get across is we want to work with you all to kind of make this happen. And in our view, the best way to have this go forward, especially ideally within this decade, is through Auckland Council and the work that we can do through this. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Henderson. And perhaps you'd like to move the recommendation of thanks, and seconded by Councillor Ferry. And we do have Auckland Transport personnel here, Connor, and of course you have been before this committee, so we would encourage that ongoing dialogue as we look to what's best for our city in the future. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks again, Connor.
Thank you all for your time.
The next item on public input comes from Climate Liberation Aotearoa, and we have Robin Beeling here today to talk to us about counting cruise ship emissions in the emissions reduction planning. Welcome, Robin. You have 5 minutes, and then a couple of questions at the end of that. So over to you.
Kia ora tātou, thank you for hearing from us. My name is Robin Beeling. I'm speaking for Climate Liberation Aotearoa about including cruise ships in emission reduction targets. First, let's address the idea that cruise ships bring benefits, because the opposite is true. The following information comes from evidence, good statistics or peer-reviewed academic papers, which I can share the references for. Tourism employs people and supports our economy, but the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research says most tourist spending is domestic, not international like cruise ships. The important statistic is that despite cruise ship passengers being 9% of international tourist numbers, they contribute only 3% of the total international tourist spend. So cruise ship passengers dramatically underspend in their contribution to our economy compared to the tourists who fly in. These are the most recent statistics we have from 2019, but we know this pattern of cruise tourists underspending hasn't changed because it's baked into the business model of the cruise industry. The cruise industry doesn't make money on the ticket, they make money through passengers doing most of their spending on board, paying the cruise company, for instance, dining on the cruise ships where it doesn't benefit our communities at all. You may think of a cruise as a luxury experience where you'd expect passengers to spend a lot in our stores or restaurants, but Otago University tourism professor James Higham says today's cruise passengers are less wealthy than they have been in the past and spend little in our local communities. So the cruise industry takes as much of the passenger spend as possible and doesn't share the benefits like other forms of tourism. Don't think that our economy relies on or benefits from the cruise industry. Cruise ship tourists are economically the worst tourists for us. But what else is wrong with cruise ships? Otago University academic Dr. Inga Smith calculated that a cruise ship holiday to New Zealand emits 4 times the greenhouse gas emissions of an equivalent holiday flying and staying in hotels. She says, from a climate change perspective, going on a cruise ship is one of the worst holidays that you can take. The cruise industry is so polluting that climate activists like me would encourage people to fly instead. The fuel that cruise ships burn puts carcinogenic particulates into our air. In terms of these particulates, one cruise ship is the equivalent of 1 million cars. We don't think about these mostly invisible ultrafine particulates, but we pay the cost when people die from cancer from air pollution caused by fossil fuels. According to the British Medical Journal, fossil fuel pollution kills 5 million people every year. They're poisoning passengers and the people of Auckland. A peer-reviewed study in the Marine Policy Journal says that cruise ships are responsible for 1/4 of all ocean waste, despite being only 1% of the merchant fleet. Our ocean ecosystems are under massive pressure, and hundreds of millions of people rely on these ecosystems for food. Here in Tamaki Makaurau, cruise ships also disrupt our commuter ferries. 98 ferry sailings around Auckland were cancelled or delayed last December due to cruise ships arriving or departing from Prince's Wharf. Not only do cruise ships bring us no benefits, they're contributing to climate chaos, they're killing people with air pollution, trashing our oceans, and disrupting our public transport. We demand that cruise ship emissions be included in Auckland's total emissions, the ones that count towards our emission targets. The emissions are being released into the atmosphere. They have to be part of our reduction goals as well. Although central government isn't taking action on emissions, you have the power to influence them. Declarations of climate emergency and the nuclear-free movement both worked like this, with local government taking the lead. We have made similar demands of Christchurch, Dunedin and Nelson councils, and will shortly be presenting to Wellington Council, asking them to listen to their constituents, their consciences, and take that first step. In November, the Climate Commission will be making recommendations to central government. They will likely recommend including cruise ship emissions in our targets. And while Central doesn't seem to care about the environment, if you take this step, then we believe they will too. Similar policies are being picked up around the world already. The UK and the EU will include emissions from international shipping and aviation, including cruise ships, in their trading schemes and targets from 2026. In summary, we want you to count cruise ship emissions now in the overall emissions total and count them in the city's climate targets. The statistics, they might be estimates, not perfect, but the risks of inaction are greater. We also want you to put in a real plan, a serious plan to address these emissions. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Robin, for that presentation. Slightly different perspective on cruise ships. Do we have some questions? Okay, Councillor Walker and Councillor Ferry.
A couple of questions. Is your group advocating for a shore power plug-in for cruise ships so that they don't burn the bunker fuel when they're in port?
We're advocating for less cruise ships, so having the shore power may reduce the emissions while the ships are in port, but doesn't address any of the emissions while they're travelling or any of the damage to our ocean ecosystems.
Sure. And then the second question is, if the issue is to do with the fuel of the cruise ship, and you know bunker fuel's bad news, is your group advocating for enhanced fuels, different fuels that are more environmentally friendly than the current ones, and that will also include electrification of cruise ships, which is possible.
For electrification, yes.
Thanks, Robin. Councillor Ferry.
Thanks very much. It's a really interesting idea, sort of trying to capture the emissions. Are there any cities overseas that are already doing this? Are there any examples that we could look to? I guess part of the challenge for me is at what point do they become emissions that should accrue to our city as opposed to, you know, say if the ship's coming from Sydney, when does it cross the line? So are there any international examples we could look at? Thanks.
We could look at Christchurch City Council. So they have included it so far in their inventory, but not in the emission targets. And the way they're counting it is the emissions from import, as well as half of the emissions from travelling to and from the port.
Thank you. Have you talked to Local Government New Zealand about sort of a New Zealand-wide council stance, or are you just going council by council?
We're just going council by council, but thank you for that suggestion.
Okay, I'm happy to move that we receive the presentation, seconded by Councillor Fletch. I would just say, Robin, that AT personnel are here, as indeed are some of our council transport officers, and I think certainly your presentation and your request will be forwarded to them and will be brought up in discussions, because you've raised a number of very pertinent points here that we should be considering, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you again, and thank you for your team that have accompanied you today. Okay, we move on from public input now to local board input, and we did receive one request, and which was approved, just like most requests that come before this committee, and the person presenting today is Alexandra Bonham, and Alex will address the committee on behalf of the board regarding concerns around access for residential and commercial buildings to servicing, loading and legal parking solutions. I think a presentation it was forwarded later, thank you. So welcome, Alex. You have 5 minutes, and then some questions from the members. Away you go.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you so much for having me, Chair, Council, IMSB. We want to talk to you about maintenance of residential and commercial buildings in Auckland city centre. Can I also acknowledge Dean Kimpton and members of AT behind me? I'm so glad you're here and listening to us. We love the city centre master plan. We love access for all. We love the transport emission reduction plan. But we have also heard from our businesses and our residents for many years that servicing and loading is not being properly managed in the city centre. And we acknowledge too that room to move is coming. And that's fantastic, and we acknowledge all the work done by the DPO and in the past the ADO and other work done by AT, but we still have buildings that don't have any access. So this isn't about private cars or private parking, it's about servicing and loading and maintenance. So here is an example. No building is an island, but you might think with the yellow dotted lines around this one that it is. Let me just move this on my own one. I've got my notes. So let me quote one resident, and I apologise for the squeamish. I could go out and get a blowjob on the lane and get away with it, but when I want to hire a removal truck to park up and move out the contents of my apartment, I get 2 parking fines. We're talking about Mills Lane and Exchange Lane, and I think that his assessment is entirely accurate of this situation. So this is a picture of when I visited the site. If you have a look on Google Maps, you'll also see another car illegally parked there because there just really isn't an option about where you can go. So this is another quote from a resident. Trades get tickets depending on the warden, day or time. We can't get work done in the building simply because trades won't come. And that's a real problem for this building because it's a heritage building. It's got old pipes. It's got old systems inside it. There was a water leak recently. They had to get a plumber round. But when they call up trades, they often get told that they're not willing to come because they can't park anywhere nearby. And they will just have to take the parking tickets, which they don't want to do because they mount up. So they have a plumber who has a relationship with another development who has got a traffic management plan or something and is able to give them some parking. But that's not the way the city should run, that you have to, you know, lean on your mates to find somewhere to park in nearby proximity so that you can sort out a flood. Other businesses don't come at all, so it's very difficult to get a shower cubicle delivered. You can't get tiles delivered if you need to redo your bathroom. If you want to move house, it's nigh on impossible. Now, I know that designs are going on for Mills Lane, Exchange Lane at the moment, and we are very supportive of them. The designs look good. There's a range of options. There might be 1 new service space or maybe 3. It's still being designed. We're fully supportive of that, but it's got to go through lots of committees, and then construction doesn't start till next year. And we have got a building that needs to be maintained in the interim with very few options. And so we are urging AT also to put the well-functioning of buildings and places first, whether they are residential or commercial, and to find solutions sooner rather than later. And we wonder whether some form of tickets or that the building manager might be able to give out to people to give them, you know, servicing rights, you know, the ability to park for half an hour, if that's possible, or whether it's possible to paint in some loading bays in the short term that can then be painted over with the final solution. We don't think paint is very expensive. We don't think this is very controversial. There used to be servicing and loading bays in this area, but at the moment, they're just not there. They were painted for another development, and we are waiting this new solution. So something sooner rather than later would be absolutely fantastic. If we don't have the city centre functioning properly, and by that I mean if we don't have the buildings being maintained and serviced, then we don't have a well-functioning city centre. And we want 100,000 people to live in the city centre. We want to be able to use and adapt the buildings we have. We're not going to start again. So please can we find some compromises? Please can we find some solutions for here and extrapolating across Karangahape Road and everywhere else.
Thank you, Alex. It's a strong conclusion, and maybe prompt some questions from councillors. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Have you, in your role in local board, advocated through, advocated to Auckland Transport yourself? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out where you've got to, and is it you're coming here because you haven't been able to solve it yourself, or just trying to get where we fit in the loop?
Yes, so the local board has advocated for the last 2 terms for servicing and loading solutions for the city centre, and we were told by Heart of the City that we were late to the game, that they had already been advocating for this for many years already. When it comes to this particular example of Mills Lane, yes, we have had meetings with AT. We are strongly supportive. We have met with designers. We are very supportive of all the work that's going on. But when we ask for a solution that can come in sooner, I mean, this was supposed to start construction in the second half of this year, but it's been delayed till next year. We're left in a position where businesses and residential buildings are expected to go for years before they get any solution at all. And so what we're asking from you is to put pressure on AT to find some interim solutions that could be delivered much faster, where they are low risk, so that we can support businesses and residents.
So follow up if I can, Mr. Chair. So you're saying that AT have said no to you as a local board, so you're now looking for a bit more help. Is that correct?
AT have said that it's not really in their power to speed up the process. It needs to, they have a process of transport committees and everything else. So this is, I suppose, an advocacy both to AT and to the governing body to find a solution to deliver solutions faster, because when we have talked to people at an operational level, they are bound by the constraints of timeframes for the permanent solution, and I don't think they have it within their remit to find some faster ones. So I'm coming to you to ask for that.
Councillor Dalton?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation, Alex. Did the Waitemata Local Board feedback on the room to move consultation?
Oh, we are very supportive of Room to Move, and I believe that is starting in the middle of this year, and we're unlikely to see solutions actually roll out in the city after that. We're strongly supportive. Be bold, we say. Make it work.
Can I ask you if you believe that access for everyone should have been developed before feeding back on Room to Move?
I don't think Room to Move should be delayed a single second. I think Access for All is a terrific policy. We're strongly supportive of Access for All, the City Centre Master Plan. The policy and strategies are excellent. It's getting down there and finding solutions on the ground in an imperfect city built over many, many decades that we need. And it's not going to be perfect, but we'd like to see solutions sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Last question. So interim solutions being perhaps passes for loading and unloading or temporary lines?
Yeah, maybe temporary lines where there just is no option really for trades except to park illegally to do the things that they're supposed to do.
Thank you.
Just two more questions, folks. Councillor Bartley and Councillor Sayers to finish us off.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Simpson asked my question. I thought this was more operational, but I can see it's probably given us more information when we speak with Dean Kimpton about the local board engagement. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. You know, on the surface of it, it looks very reasonable request, but as you say, you know, these processes just need to be kind of sorted out and fast-tracked somehow. So my question is directed to you, Barry, if I might. I know that Dean's in the room as well, but if obviously it's an advocacy to us, and if you're able to make any comment to help your cause.
Through the Chair, happy to do that. I've actually been in contact with Auckland Transport and working with one of their people there who's been involved in this, and we're looking to bring a paper, or looking for them to bring a paper to next month's meeting to set out some pathways forward. So it's something we can work on with them.
Okay. Thank you, Barry. So that's a pretty quick follow-up, Alex. Do we have someone that would like to move? Moved by Councillor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Fletcher. All those in favour? Against? Okay, thank you for your presentation today, Alex, and we'll look forward to that paper next month then.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so moving on, folks, that's item 6 done. Extraordinary items, there are none. Which brings us to the first item on the agenda in terms of the work programs that we're covering today, and this is an update on the preparatory work